What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Makai back in the building. Feel me? Today we have another Thinking Basketball video today. It's gonna go into Michael Jordan now. Instead of going to Larry Bird, we're gonna go into Michael Jordan. I'm gonna get y'all with the Larry Bird videos. We've been going for a Larry Bird marathon, you know what I mean? I love learning about Larry Bird. I just thought we should just switch it up, but with MJ for today. So today it's gonna go detailed Michael Jordan analysis using new data to gauge his impact. So I think it's gonna cover around 88 to 91. That's when his peak scoring, all that. So we're gonna cover all that today. I hope you guys enjoy what I'm doing. I hope you guys are enjoying what's going on to the channel. Let me know in the comment sections if there's anything you guys want me to improve on. I take criticism very well. So, just let me know. I respond to everybody in the comment section. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video, man. I ain't finna waste none of y'all time.
You know Michael Jordan. You know his legendary moments. You know that fadeaway. You know his aerial gifts. But do you know what made him unique as a scorer? The ins and outs of his passing game, his defensive strengths and weaknesses. Jordan's mystique grew in the 90s, but did he actually reach his peak before he ever hoisted a championship trophy? And were those the best seasons that we've ever seen on a basketball court?
Now, before he even answers that, we get into that. I think that his greatest season of all time as an individual player is either 91 or 92. It's one of those two seasons, give or take, because, he had a high scoring average. I think one of those finals, I think it was 92, or was it 91 where he averaged 10 assists in the finals? I forgot which one it was, but he averaged 10 assists in the finals. He was playing phenomenally those two seasons, especially those two seasons, right? I'm in the mix of like watching the 92 finals because somebody had told me that MJ was not guarding Clyde Drexler and Scottie Pippen was guarding Clyde Drexler. So we're going to see. I want to look at it and just see if Michael Jordan was really checking Clyde Drexler. And looking from game one, looking from the, I've kind of been into like the second quarter of the game. MJ has been checking Clyde Drexler pretty much, But I'm going to keep watching and see what's going on.
You are watching what greatness is all about.
Where's Larry Bird in all this?
Has it blocked by Elijah Wan.
Michael Jordan saves the day.
This series tackles one question. Who was the best at his best? We start at the ABA merger and go through the best multi-year stretches, examining the legends who provided the most on-court impact. These are the greatest peaks.
Let's get it. Okay, 89.
He's the best athlete. He's one of the best competitors. He's one of the most skilled players. And that, to me, makes him the best basketball player that I've ever seen play.
In this series, we've seen how big men ruled the game for decades, and how the offensive brilliance of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird reimagined what taller players could do. But there were high-flying wings with offensive success in the 60s and 70s too. Elgin Baylor was the first superstar who really attacked vertically off the bounce. Then Julius Erving and David Thompson extended that approach. As a kid growing up in North Carolina, Jordan idolized Thompson, who combined an explosive first step with a little skywalking to finish third in MVP voting in 1978.
And that conversation of who MJ looked up to, it's really a combination of players. I never heard him ever say David Thompson, but I've heard him say Julius Erving, and I've heard him say that his favorite player was Magic Johnson. Those two players that he looked up to, Julius Erving and Magic Johnson. Never been David Thompson to me. I've never heard him say that, but it is what it is.
Jordan was the next leap in that evolutionary chain, and his incredible first step set a new standard for attacking the rim. When he entered the league, Michael could just teleport around defenders with his burst, able to get around players in just a single step. And even though he was a hair slower by 1989, this incredible acceleration was always the foundation of Jordan's success. He'd burn defenders to the right or to the left with this penetration, and he was so quick that blinking was dangerous. Joe Dumars flinches at a turnaround here and then becomes a turnstile. There wasn't anything special about this being a first step. It was just mind-bending acceleration. Jordan's like a Formula One car racing against Priuses. That acceleration shot him out of a cannon, and that speed was a launch pad for his vertical finishing. He's flying by the second step here, and that helps him actually fly. Really, the man spent so much time in the air he could have registered a tail number with the FAA. Some of these drives remind me of a running back turning the corner, where he'd take off and get really low, then transfer all that energy into his leaping. Note how his body protects the ball here as he hovers to the other side of the rim. And he leveraged his body as an airborne shield like this, especially when jumping off of 2 feet into contact. Michael was strong enough to absorb hits while airborne like this, and these physical gifts helped him reach the line at historically prolific rates. Magic kept defenses off balance with his playmaking, but Michael simply overwhelmed them with relentless pressure on the rim. His huge hands helped make some of this aerial wizardry possible, manipulating the ball in the air on these drives or holding it away from shot blockers. That's near the top of the square on the release, and these things were so big that the ball could slip off mid-shot, and he could still reset it in his catcher's mitts like nothing happened. Of course, the hang time also makes this work too, contorting and bending his body around bigger defenders in the paint. Jordan displayed the most fluid body control of perhaps any player ever, slithering around opponents as he floated into a clear shot attempt.
That's one thing I've always admired about Jordan's game is actually the fact that he's able to absorb contact and still finish. And growing up, I used to really admire that about his game. Really taking in the contact and still finishing strong.
And we haven't even mentioned his footwork, which was balletic at times, allowing him to keep his balance while pivoting around like a top, and then that hanging aerial control to still square his shoulders on the shot. His legs were kicked out on the foul here, and it didn't matter. All that hovering and twisting helped Michael's mid-range game too. His typical pull-ups were supercharged with that elevation, hitting a trampoline and then firing over defenders. And whether he was twisting, leaning, or stopping on a dime, he could square his shoulders and still shoot.
And I want to bring up the fact when Jordan first came in the league, he wasn't that terrific of a mid-range shooter. He kind of still had to develop that. I think by his second or third season, by his third season, he was, starting to get his mid-range game, because I remember I had saw, some games in his first season, it wasn't like a release, you know what I'm saying? Like a Larry Bird where it's a release. It was kind of like a push. You know what I mean? It was like a push, and that really affected his shot, especially coming out of college and stuff like that. But he improved. He definitely improved by his second and third season.
Kinesthetic mastery made his famous dagger against Cleveland in 1989 possible, where he pumps and hangs, but right there squares himself comfortably and strokes it. Incredible. We shouldn't overlook his shooting from the mid-range either. He was an 85% free throw shooter during these years and was a knockdown shooter inside 20 feet when given space. But he also created space vertically with that leaping ability, changing directions and springing clear for a good look. Michael didn't make thousands of jumpers with a hand in his face. He made thousands by jumping so high, his releases were rarely ever bothered. As you've probably noticed, his handle was good enough to support sharp cuts, and he really liked this low in and out dribble to set up defenders and probe for open space. He wasn't an incredible ball handler, but he was good enough to knife around the court, and since he could also score at the basket with either hand, Jordan's robust repertoire made him the greatest scorer in NBA history.
Notice how he did not say that he goes to the right more, or he kind of lacked in the left hand. No, He could finish with both hands. Michael Jordan had a left hand, okay? For those guys who was out there saying that he did not have a left hand, Michael Jordan had a left hand.
If we look at 3-year playoff stretches and adjust for inflation to 2020 scoring rates, Jordan scored an astounding 34 points every 75 possessions on true shooting 7% better than average from 1989 to 1991. He holds the top 9 stretches in postseason scoring rate, peaking in the late 80s and early 90s when his explosiveness was still intact and his mid-range accuracy was dialed in. He could always fall back on his most iconic move, the fadeaway. You see what I did there? Sometimes MJ would get right into this off the catch, and that hang time and separation created really clean releases. He preferred going to his right hand on this move until about 1990 or 1991, when that vintage fade to the other side started popping up more regularly. I recommend J. Kyle Mann's History of the Fadeaway for more on this shot. Since the triangle offense organically generated post-ups, Phil Jackson's arrival in 1991 facilitated more fadeaways for Jordan. Here's a great counter cut, audibling off this route with the defender overplaying him and flashing right back to the low block for the catch and turn. Michael's agility helped him off ball too, using screens and setting up opponents for sharp changes in direction that freed him up. So much of Chicago's offense before Phil Jackson was bringing Jordan off picks from the baseline, and since he was comfortable flowing into attacks like this since his college days, the activity and principles of the triangle helped harness his off-ball movement. The triangle offense prioritizes balancing the floor and ball movement, principles that played right into Jordan's strengths as a catch-and-go scorer. While Michael could read screens and then flash to open areas well, he could also punish ball denial with that quick change of direction, and with increased space he was so hard to contain. These back cuts were organic, feeling an overplay then darting free to the bucket. And his movement meant defenses always had to worry about him. He cuts right out of traps like this instead of idling, and even when a teammate misses him, those cuts could lead to rebounds. All his activity and his athleticism made him an excellent offensive rebounder, which is often overlooked because he was usually doing the shooting, but this added additional off-ball value to his game. On the other hand...
And I like how he just said that, because the game where he scored 69 points, he had 18 rebounds, he was doing a lot of that during that game. And that's how he was able to get 18 rebounds.
His weakness as an off-ball player was his three-point shooting, where he peaked at 34% on low volume. It didn't seem to matter if these were pull-ups or catch-and-shoot chances, but I do think Jordan's release at the apex of his huge jump limited his range to a degree. When the NBA shortened the line to 22 feet in 1995, Mike made 38% on over 750 attempts before struggling again when the line returned to 24 feet. Otherwise, Jordan was such a dynamic scorer that he flummoxed almost any defense of the time. The Bad Boys Pistons dented him slightly, but that's about it. And yet, despite his otherworldly scoring gifts, he wouldn't have 6 championships without a huge part of his game that is often overlooked.
Yeah, and you see how he said that, the Pistons dented his game? A lot of people act like, not a lot of people, but especially those guys on the Bad Boys, they act like that they stopped Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was so effective with his game, he still averaged 40. If that's stopping somebody, then I don't know what to say, man.
Rumors. Michael Jordan is retired.
Faked his own retirement. I don't know. I know he loves basketball. He's probably playing in his backyard with his kids, but I don't think he faked his retirement.
When Michael was younger, he was often criticized for shooting into double teams frequently. And while his athleticism was breathtaking, his shot selection was questionable at times. Some of these were really difficult attempts. He was so skilled that it's hard to say he took poor shots per se, but MJ was frequently doubled or tripled and bypassed wide open teammates for some of these attempts. Given his high volume shooting, there are few players in NBA history who shot into extra coverage while a teammate was open more than Michael Jordan. Now, without strong three-point shooting teammates back then, missing these spot-up shooters probably didn't hurt that much. And more importantly, these missed passes were easily outweighed by all of the open shots Michael did set up. His constant penetration collapsed defenses into the lane, and when he did opt to pass, Chicago ended up with wide open looks. That last play was a jump pass, and Jordan often went airborne for a shot before checking down to an open shooter like this. That Luigi hang time helped him to react to defensive decisions before finally passing the mic to a bandmate. These jump passes set up more than just outside shots. Jordan preferred to hit teammates in the lane, and his go-to playmaking move was drawing a defender away from the rim as he hovered, then throwing one right to that vacated spot. Mike loved this jump and dump laydown, where he drove to the basket and then when the big man stepped up to help, found a way to drop it off for a layup. These were some of his best passes, and he really dialed them in during the 1991 playoffs when he anticipated these little openings more and used his parasailing ability to exploit them more consistently.
And he was doing that a lot more as his career progressed. He was doing that's what he loved to do. A lot of his flashy passes and a lot of his great passes were off of jump passes.
However, leaving his feet like this caused some issues when he decided not to shoot, holding a hot potato while hovering with no clear outlet. When he was in the air like this, he was at the mercy of whatever was open. He switches to a pass here, but there's nothing really there. And another problem with passing like this is avoiding all the contesting arms and hands, so many of these balls were deflected, and as a result, his reactionary jump passes led to a number of his turnovers. Jordan rarely anticipated openings as a passer. This is a simple lead pass to the streaking Horace Grant, but he had to throw it early and he sees it late, and then he thinks better of it. Here he doesn't realize this teammate is uncovered, and so it's a dubious jumper instead of a layup pass. On this one, Scottie Pippen's backdoor cut opens a lob, but Jordan sees it after it's free, then fires it, and man could Pippen pass. Most of Michael's best dimes were more reactive, seeing an opening and then whipping it to a teammate. Despite his reputation, he was always a willing passer, and learning more angles and reads over the years helped him drop higher level dimes like this.
That makes a lot more sense, what he just said. And quite frankly, like from what I've watched from Jordan, that does make sense. A lot of his passes were like, if I don't have a shot, now I'm going to look and see who's open. I do see him open right there, but I want to get my shot first. If I don't get it, then I'm going to give it to him. And that's really what happens when you have a very huge, prolific scorer on the team. They're going to try to look for shots and stuff like that, which, quite frankly, that's a new perspective on his passing ability. That's interesting.
In a bit of manipulation beyond that jump pass, going to the look away at times, and this is his peak passing in 1991, moving the defender with his eyes, then impersonating Magic in front of Irvin himself. Jordan was also willing to look ahead for outlet passes. This is one of his better ones, and he was a good transition passer, dropping a brilliant dime on the break every once in a while too. To be fair, he missed plenty of good passes in these spots as well. Pippen's clear here, and flying into the lane, that familiar drop-off is open. In studying passers over the years, the great ones will find about 90% of these open looks, whereas Michael connected on them about 66% of the time, but keep in mind the sheer volume of open chances he carved out by drawing attention away from his teammates with his perpetual scoring pressure. In the playoffs, there are no more than 5 players in NBA history who created more shots for teammates than Jordan, and if we use the same playmaking estimates from the prior episode, Michael set up his teammates for an open look an estimated 14 times every 100 possessions, a stretch only bested by the game's top offensive engines from the last 15 years. And so, while Jordan was revered for winning 10 scoring titles, he was one of the all-time playmaking machines in league history. That raised a weak roster and carried a strong one later on. From 1985 to 1989, before Scottie Pippen emerged and the triangle took hold, the Bulls' offensive efficiency was only around league average. There was only so much Michael could do as the lone offensive force on a defensively constructed roster. Pippen's emergence gave the Bulls another elite finisher and secondary scoring weapon, but more importantly, another playmaker. Scottie's passing is historically under-discussed, and he was a deadly grab-and-go player, either finding layups in transition or doing the damage himself as he came down the lane. Pip was also one of the all-time great wing defenders, and that, along with his unselfishness, made him a near-perfect complementary piece next to Michael. Jordan himself improved as a passer at the end of the 80s and into the 90s, and with better teammates, the Bulls roared to some of the best offensive seasons on record, right behind Magic's Lakers. And when we think of Magic as having everything run through him on offense, Michael's combination of scoring and playmaking gave him one of the highest offensive loads in playoff history. While Jordan's passing highs were mixed with some blemishes, his defense was even more boom or bust. The highlight reels where he's flying all around the court.
Before he gets into the defense, I just want to say this right now. There's been a lot of speculation and guys out here trying to bash Jordan. You know, before it was his competition, his competition in the 90s was weak. Then it was that Jordan doesn't have a left hand. Now they're getting on his defense. Now they're saying that Michael Jordan was not that great of a defender. Which, quite frankly, that's not true at all. Like, Jordan's role for defense was kind of to roam. He had the defensive IQ and the athleticism to roam and to sneak up on players, get blocks, get in the passing lanes, get steals, and stuff like that. But Jordan could play on-ball defense. He could play you one-on-one. I don't know where this narrative came up where Jordan could not play defense, but Jordan could play defense. He has what? He's a 9-time all defense. Come on, man. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Overlook all of his strikeouts and instead focus on his impressive home runs. For instance, jumping passing lanes like this might produce his most valuable defensive plays. These interceptions could be huge, pick sixes that went the other way for easy points, and at times Jordan was like a cornerback sitting on a passing route with elite closing speed. In 1989, Thai aficionado and coach Doug Collins busted out a half-court trap at times, allowing MJ to size up cross-court passes and then turn them into easy offense. But these gambles whiffed as well. Michael would sell out for them frequently, and in this case he can cover this kick-out pass here, but is going for more with this steal, and that can lead to wide-open looks. By my eye, Jordan hit pay dirt more often than not, but there was a tax to pay for these steal attempts. He could get in passing lanes without gambling, reacting quickly in short space with the defensive equivalent of his first step. This is a bread and butter cross screen of the era, and Jordan not only switches it, but pounces like a black cat. And he could shoot the gap with that burst. This pass is airborne for less than half a second, and, well, Michael's airborne for more than half a second. Michael's quickness helped him keep smaller, shifty point guards in front of him, and on the outside he could churn his feet while swiveling his hips to the dribbler in textbook fashion. For instance, he often guarded Isaiah Thomas during the bad boy battles, and MJ's acceleration allowed him to recover laterally at times, and his combination of size, strength, and agility held Isaiah below his normal scoring numbers in those matchups. But that Kenny Rogers gambling was part of his man defense too. Michael would backpedal to recover a lot, and his preferred move there was to swipe down for the steal as he slid in front of a dribbler. There was a lot of swiping, actually, spamming the Y button at times, and plenty of them connected, but they also gave opponents openings that would have been way harder to find if Jordan had just played it straight up.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Jordan, he could play on-ball defense, like I said before, but he did gamble a lot. And I mean a lot. Swiping, trying to poke, all that, trying to strip, he did that a lot. Especially in his early years. Now, as he started to progress in his, in his career, he kind of got smarter and his IQ definitely, got higher. But earlier in his career, he would gamble a lot.
When he wasn't swiping at the rock, he was reaching, first on Joe Dumars here, then another reach around for the steal. He lunged for steals a lot on the block like this, and here that lets the smaller Brian Shaw turn clear for an easy look. MJ did flick plenty of balls this way, leading to deflections or turnovers, but he was usually overly aggressive with this move, lurching at air not once on this play, but twice, leading to a layup. He brought those same habits to the post, the swipe down move or a little flick, and while he stripped opponents some time, I think he was better off playing straight up against post players and using his athleticism and strength to contest. Against our old friend Magic in the 1991 finals, Jordan gambled, and then gambled, and then gambled, and was absolutely torched by the bigger Johnson in the post. On occasion, Chicago sent a second defender, and you know what happened. Another defensive gambit Jordan loved was the surprise double team, where he ambushed unsuspecting players and let those giant hands pickpocket people. As Karl Malone knows all too well, these well-timed sniper shots worked against the deliberate post-ups of the 80s and 90s. Of course, there was a small price to pay when he couldn't cash in on these, because it left his mark wide open without structured rotations, and even after this play turns into a more standard trap, it's Jordan's man who was wide open the whole time on the other side of the court. Michael just had an unquenchable thirst to make plays on defense back then. He's guarding a shooter here, but drifts into the paint looking for action, and that was Randy Whitman's fourth straight jumper. Jordan lurked like this because he did make a ton of plays from the paint. One of his favorites was swooping in at the exact moment post players were shooting. And MJ was one of the best shot blocking guards of all time, able to leverage that athleticism to hang and reach shots, and this gave him a level of rim protection that most guards couldn't match. These saves at the hoop were high value plays, and that defies physics.
You would be floating above the ground, never touching the surface.
Even with a little less verticality, by 1990 or 91, he could still fly in and save the day. This play from 1989 demonstrates the big payoff of Jordan lurking near the lane. He's able to stop a dunk, and this quick reaction and elevation would be elite even for a big man. Those aerial superpowers even allowed him to protect the rim from behind. He served as a backstop here by flying in from the free throw line on this incredible rotation. I don't know about you, but I find Jordan's high-risk defensive style to be difficult to evaluate. If we look at our historical impact metrics, he's right at the top of the heap, with a nice lead in my box plus minus model, but it's difficult for stats like these to handle defense well. And what we really care about is overall impact. So the team here at Thinking Basketball combed through nearly 200 old Jordan games to calculate his plus minus and give us a better picture of his impact. In the playoffs from 1989 to 1991, Jordan's Bulls were outscored by 12 points every 48 minutes when he sat on the bench, but they outscored opponents by 8 points when he played. There's some noise in stats like these, but Chicago's 20-point increase with Jordan in the game would rank 9th since the league began tracking this in 1997, which puts him up with the all-time results, but certainly doesn't separate him from the pack. As we've seen, he was quick to rotate most of the time. Here the play unfolds rapidly and Michael jumps on the threat. but I wouldn't say he had great help awareness. He's late recognizing this despite a teammate pointing it out, and he could become momentarily preoccupied with action in front of him, forgetting to rotate for a second. He was a strong enough defensive rebounder as a guard that it probably added some value to his defensive game. And given all of his defensive strengths and weaknesses, I view him overall as a strong all-league defender, but not quite an all-time defensive wing. There are still larger questions to think about here. How would he fit next to a post player who wanted the ball more? Are there diminishing returns next to a ball-dominant star? And what's his legacy look like if Scottie Pippen never emerged? What's undeniable is that Jordan was the first perimeter player to dominate with mega scoring and playmaking, which puts him in the conversation for greatest offensive player ever, and given his defensive impact, it's easy to see why Michael Jordan is often considered the greatest basketball player of all time.
It is really, really interesting. I learned some things about Jordan's game. I mean, I learned about, his playmaking abilities, and I learned about his defensive ability as well. But they only covered really 89 to 91. So you kind of, this doesn't grasp his whole career. This really just grasps his peak. Really his peak scoring ability, really. Because you still got 92 to 98, and you still got 84 to 88. 84 to 88. So, I mean, besides those years, you only took a 3-year gap. And I think this is a pretty good explanation of how Jordan's game was during his peak scoring years. And like I said, I've learned new things. Let me know in the comment section what you thought about this, man. I want to hear what you guys got to say about this, man. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, man, I'm gonna catch you.